You've probably, no doubt, at this point, listened to an audio book. This is going to be a video book of my life, a memoir, if you will, in video form, because I think it's the best way to tell it. I have more of a talent and inclination to make videos than I do to write a book or a memoir. So let's get started, because I have no idea how many chapters it will take. I've lived so far 70 and a half years since I entered the world out of my mother's womb. And I'm sure some of the years of my life I'll be able to cover in one chapter. Some are going to take more than one. So let's get going. No time to waste. It's called Best Things Come in Small Packages. And I entered the world as a small package to my proud parents, the firstborn son. I was born July 22nd, 1951 in Charleston, South Carolina at the Naval Yard Hospital. I cost my parents a whopping $7. My dad had been in the Army for a brief time, and he was due to go overseas. He had his orders to go to Paris, France during the Korean War conflict. And he left a week after I was born, but luckily he was there to witness not the actual birth. They had told him to go home and wait, and then I came suddenly quicker than they thought, so they had to call him back from home, and he got there and had his cigar, I suppose. My parents were very happy to finally have a son. They had been married 10 and a half months, so they didn't waste any time starting a family. My mother, Virginia Ruth Huckabee Patterson, was born also in South Carolina in 1930, and she departed planet Earth in 2003 on April 11th from leukemia that she had battled, and severe osteoarthritis plagued her for years. My father is still very active, working full-time, and he lives in Virginia Beach, Norman Boyd Patterson. My dad, Norman, was adopted by his father, Norman Boyd Patterson Sr., and his mother, Mary Patterson. His birth parents being a medical doctor and nurse who didn't want the responsibility of parenthood, apparently, and didn't want to have an abortion, thank goodness. And so his adopted parents he loved very much. When he was given the opportunity to learn who his birth parents were in his teen years, he declined, wasn't interested in people that didn't want him. My dad worked from age 11 when his father passed away and has worked ever since. My mother's parents, Henry Benjamin Huckabee, whom I'm named after. My name is Norman Benjamin Patterson, so I'm named after my father and my grandfather. And my grandmother, Geneva Huckabee, and both grandparents were very loving, as well as my paternal grandmother. I did not know my paternal grandfather, but my maternal grandmother, Mary Patterson. But all three of my grandparents passed away in the 1970s. And I was circumcised a couple days after birth. I'm sure that was a tremendous trauma for a newborn. I personally wish it had never happened. It's one of those things I don't say I regret, because I had no say in the matter. I just simply wish it had not been done to me. Nevertheless, I've gotten along. I don't know that it will ever have cost me any minutes or hours of my life, anything like that. But did it cost me some pleasure as far as sexual experience? Sure. I know it did. It does all circumcised males. It's a practice I wish would stop in the United States, where half the boys are circumcised still today. As I say, my father left to go overseas a week later. So I didn't really get to bond with him much in that first year. I was said, these are just hearsay stories I heard from my mother. I believe they're true. When my grandparents came to see me in the hospital, I was in an incubator for a little while because I was born with jaundice, yellow jaundice. So my skin was fairly dark complexion. I have a slight olive complexion to this day. Not really, but I mean, I tan very easily. I have a skin pigment that is very easy to get a tan. I don't burn that easily, as some people do in the sun. When my grandparents came to the hospital, they saw me lying there in the room through the glass, and they thought I was an African American, a black child. They were just appalled because my grandparents were, well, a little bit prejudicial back in those days in the early 50s in the Deep South. White folks still had not really come to terms with African American black people as being equals. It was most people, I should say, especially of a less educated and less awareness that color of a person's skin really makes no difference who they are. It really shouldn't to anyone, and I don't know why it even still does. But nevertheless, they were appalled. They thought that I was a black child, and they wanted to find the real grandson. They didn't. My grandfather didn't really accept that I was his grandson, that I was named after him. And my mother insisted that is your grandson, and he's not black. He has jaundice, and he's white, and trust me, it's gonna all work out, and it did. But I thought that was a humorous little story about my birth. I'm happy that I'm here on Earth, but I had serious issues with my height early on in my childhood, that I wasn't bigger, but I was not an abnormally small infant. I was 27 inches long. I weighed 7 pounds, 13 ounces. I was born at 12:15 p.m. on a Sunday. I'm a Cancerian, but I'm on the cusp of Cancer. Leo follows the next day, less than 12 hours after I was born. So I have influences from both horoscope signs. I was born in the year of the rabbit, of the Chinese Lunar New Year animal. Harry S. Truman was the U.S. president, although I have no recollection of him being president, of course, being that young. It was an interesting time in America, a very conservative time for sure, in terms of society at large. It was just 6 years after World War II had ended. America was in a boom. I was one of the original baby boomers, not the first, but the baby boomer generation started, I believe, 1948, when a lot of the returning soldiers were now getting GI Bill or getting back to work or whatever, starting a family. The economy was starting to take off in America, as it was in other countries around the world. And I was part of the early television generation, although it would be several years before I would become aware of TV. I'm sure by the age of 3 or 4, I was sitting in front of the tube, using it as a babysitter sometimes to keep me preoccupied with the images of early golden age of television. I had a very strong, deep connection with my mother until she passed away in 2003. She raised me 99% of my life as far as the upbringing and teaching me things, doing things for me. My father, a very loving man and still is today, was a workaholic and pretty much still is to some degree. He loves working. I don't know if workaholic's a bad thing for him. It actually might be one of the things that sustained him all these years, his capacity for work, his dedication to work. And my father, a very soft-spoken man. My mother was not so soft-spoken. She could actually speak loud at times when she wanted to or needed to. She was a talker. She was a little bit high-strung, prone to anxiety and worrying at times, probably unnecessarily. But a very devoted mother, very loving. I could not have asked for a more wonderful, caring mother than I had. I never doubted her love my entire life, not one moment. She did so many things for me, almost to the point of enabling me sometimes and sheltering me and doing things that I probably would have done better to have learned to do on my own at an earlier age, or learned a little bit more responsibility than I did. Nevertheless, I love her still, and I feel like she's an angel today. Just before she passed away in 2003, the week before, I asked her what she thought heaven would be like, because she was a devoted, devout Christian, Southern Baptist, and had read the Bible several times, cover to cover, in the later years of her life. And she said she thought she was going to be a beam of light, a little point of light. I just thought that was beautiful, because I believe she is an angel or something like that, that she still somehow impacts me in my life to this day, that I don't actually talk to her, but I do look at pictures of her and have thoughts of her, warm thoughts and feelings about her, and I thank her every day. I believe she's an angel that guides me in my life. And whatever people want to make of that or think of that, I don't care. That's how I feel. I'm sure other people maybe have similar views of their deceased loved ones, family or parents or whoever, grandparents even. And so I'm going to wrap it up here on chapter 1 of my life story memoir in video form. I was very, I think, happy to be born. I don't know. I mean, who knows what they were thinking when they were an infant, 1 year old. But I do believe that we came here in this life for a sole purpose, that probably my soul made a contract with my mother's soul, and my father for that matter, but a very strong bond with my mother, that I wanted to be born into this life and chose her as my mother. I believe it might work like that. No one really knows, but I believe possibly it does. And so once we enter the world, a lot of that is forgotten in our memory. But I was talking with my wife and partner tonight about memory, how important it is. The fact is, we are a compilation of memories. We are energy. We are a soul in human form. We may be a male or female or something in between nowadays, but whichever we choose to refer to ourselves as by our name, the label that we give ourselves, I believe we are basically a storehouse of chemical synapses and neurons firing in the brain that store and allow us to retrieve memories. And that without memories, such as happens to Alzheimer's patients and people with dementia, they lose their memories, they lose the identity of who they are. They no longer know who they are. They're still a physiological human being. But that person that we refer to as that person, the self, is basically gone, is dissolved. Without our memories, we don't have a reference point or basis to know who we are and who we want to continue being or becoming. And so I treasure my memories, the ones that I still have of my life. And as I go forward with my video book, I'll have a lot of memories to share with you about things that happened in my life. And it'll be a record that, as long as there's a social media platform like YouTube and it stays on there on the internet, it'll be out there for a while for whoever wants to hear it. And hopefully along the way, I'll have some words of wisdom and some words of crazy insanity and silly things I did, and lessons maybe you can learn from me if you like. But I believe that's the one thing that's sad, that when people do die, when they leave this body, this form of earth, on earth, all their memories are gone pretty much, unless they've stored those memories somehow in some form. And they're talking about today being able to plug you into a computer with transhumanism and extend life and have these memories transferred into another body with cryogenics and all these kinds of things. That might happen. It likely will happen, I suppose. Who knows? The possibilities of what the future hold are so amazing and incredible, we can't really fathom what it will be like 100, 200, 500, 1,000 years from now, what human life will be like. Nor could our ancestors 200, 500, 1,000 years ago have ever envisioned what we're living like today, this modern world we're in. So that's my wrap for tonight, chapter 1 of All Good Things Come in Small Packages.